They told him she was just a housewife. They told him she was lucky to have him. When Harrison Sterling slapped the divorce papers on the table, demanding she leave with nothing, his wife, Catherine, didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just smiled, picked up a pen, and signed away her claim to his billion-dollar empire without reading a single word. Harrison thought he had won the lottery. He thought he was free. But 6 months later, as the engines of a Gulf Stream GU-IR screamed over his company Gala, Harrison was about to learn a terrifying lesson. The most dangerous thing in the world isn't a woman who fights back. It's a woman who stays silent until she owns you. The air in the conference room on the 44th floor of the Hudson Yards Tower was so cold it could snap bone. Outside, the grey New York skyline loomed, indifferent to the destruction of a 15-year marriage happening behind the glass. Harrison Sterling sat at the head of the mahogany table, checking his Patek Philippe Nautilus for the 3rd time in a minute. He drummed his fingers on the leather armrest. He was a handsome man, in that sharp, manufactured way that money buys, teeth veneered to a blinding white, a tan from a weekend in St. Bart's, and a custom-tailored Brioni suit that cost more than most people's cars. "Is she coming, or do I need to send a subpoena to the suburbs?" Harrison snapped, glancing at his lawyer, LaDonna Caldwell. LaDonna, a man with the demeanor of a weary shark, adjusted his glasses. "She's 5 minutes late, Harrison. Relax. You're getting everything you wanted. The prenup is ironclad. But we need her to sign the waiver for the stock options just to be safe. If she fights for the shares in Sterling Dynamics, this drags on for years." "She won't fight," Harrison scoffed, leaning back. "Catherine doesn't have the stomach for a fight. She's been baking cookies and pruning roses for a decade. She doesn't know the difference between a hostile takeover and a holiday sale." The door clicked open. Harrison straightened, putting on his intimidation face, a look he practiced in the mirror before board meetings. Catherine Sterling walked in. She didn't look like a woman whose life was falling apart. She was wearing a simple trench coat, her hair pulled back in a loose, unpretentious bun. No makeup. No jewelry. Not even the 3-carat diamond ring he'd bought her 5 years ago to shut her up when he missed their anniversary. She looked clean. "Sorry I'm late," she said softly, her voice steady. The traffic coming out of the tunnel was dreadful. She sat down opposite him. She didn't look at LaDonna. She looked straight at Harrison. Her eyes, usually a warm hazel, looked almost flat. Opaque. "Let's cut the pleasantries, Catherine," Harrison said, sliding a thick stack of documents across the table. "You know why we're here. I'm moving on. Bella and I, well, you know." "I know," Catherine said. No anger, just a statement of fact. "Right. Well, LaDonna has drawn up a generous severance," Harrison lied. "It wasn't generous. It was a pittance. You get the house in Connecticut, mostly because I don't want the hassle of selling it, and a monthly stipend for 2 years. In exchange, you waive all rights to Sterling Dynamics, current and future IP, and any spousal support beyond the 2-year mark." LaDonna uncapped a fountain pen and placed it next to the documents. "Mrs. Sterling, I advise you to have your own counsel review this. It is a significant—" "No," Catherine interrupted. Harrison blinked. "No." "I don't need a lawyer," she said. She reached for the documents. She flipped to the back page, bypassing the charts, the assets list, the breakdown of the fortune she had helped him build in the early days when they were eating ramen in a basement apartment. "Catherine, be reasonable," Harrison sneered, mistaking her speed for hysteria. "If you sign that now, you can't come back crying when the money runs out. I'm taking the company public next year. We're talking billions. You're walking away with crumbs." "I don't want your money, Harrison," she said, her voice dropping an octave. It wasn't weak, it was bored. "I don't want the stipend. I don't want the house in Connecticut. You can keep it." Harrison froze. "What?" "I want a clean break," she said. She picked up the pen. The scratching sound it made on the paper was the only noise in the room. Scritch. Scratch. She signed, then she pushed the papers back. "I'm taking nothing," she said, standing up and smoothing her coat. "I just want my maiden name back. Catherine Vale." Harrison stared at her, his mouth slightly open. He felt a surge of triumphant adrenaline. She was an idiot, a complete, total idiot. She was letting him off the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars because of... what? Pride. "You're serious?" Harrison laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You're walking away empty-handed. You're going to be destitute, Kate. You haven't worked a real job in 15 years. Catherine paused at the door. She turned back, her hand on the brass handle. For a split second, a smile ghosted her lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator watching prey walk into a trap. "I'll be fine, Harrison," she said. "Good luck with the IPO. I hear the market is volatile." And then she was gone. Harrison grabbed the papers, clutching them like a trophy. "Did you see that, LaDonna? Did you see that? She took nothing. I'm free, and I kept every single share." LaDonna Caldwell didn't smile. He was staring at the door where Catherine had exited, a frown creasing his forehead. "Harrison," LaDonna said slowly, "in my 30 years of family law, I have never seen a woman walk away from $1 billion estate without asking for a dime. Unless what? Unless she's stupid," Harrison cheered, pouring himself a scotch. "Unless," LaDonna murmured, mostly to himself. "She already has something much more valuable." 6 months passed. To the outside world, Harrison Sterling was the king of New York. Sterling Dynamics was the darling of Wall Street. Their new AI-driven logistics software, Nexus, was predicted to revolutionize global shipping. Harrison was on the cover of Forbes, smiling that veneered smile with the headline, "The $1 Trillion Man." On his arm was Bella, a 24-year-old influencer whose primary talent seemed to be spending Harrison's money on handbags and posting photos of her lattes. But inside the glass walls of Sterling Dynamics, the atmosphere was rotting. "What do you mean we lost the Maersk contract?" Harrison screamed, hurling a tablet across the boardroom. It shattered against the wall. His VP of operations, a sweaty man named Greg, trembled. "I don't know, sir. We had a verbal agreement. Then, this morning, they pulled out. They said they signed with a competitor." "Who?" Harrison demanded. "Who is the competitor? We have no competitors. We own the market." "That's the thing," Greg stammered. "It's a shell company. Vantage Systems. Nobody knows who runs it. They just appeared out of nowhere 3 months ago with software that... well, sir, it's better than ours." "Better? That's impossible," Harrison hissed. "Nexus is the most advanced code in existence. I wrote the core architecture myself." That was a lie, and everyone in the room knew it. Harrison hadn't written a line of code in 10 years. The original architecture of Sterling Dynamics had been a collaboration between him and his quiet, late-night partner, his wife. But Harrison had convinced himself that Catherine was just a helper, a muse. He was the genius. "Find out who owns Vantage," Harrison ordered, "and sue them into the ground." But they couldn't find them. Vantage Systems was a ghost. It was registered in the Cayman Islands, hidden behind layers of trusts and holding companies. The losses kept piling up. First Maersk, then FedEx, then a massive government defense contract. Every time Sterling Dynamics went to bid, Vantage Systems was there, undercutting them by a fraction, offering tech that was slightly faster, slightly cleaner, slightly smarter. Harrison's cash flow began to dry up. The IPO was looming. The company Gala was set to be the launch party, where he would ring the bell and become a billionaire. But if he missed his quarterly targets, the valuation would tank. He needed cash, fast. He started liquidating personal assets. He sold the villa in Tuscany. He quietly sold a chunk of his private stock options. He needed to keep the stock price high until the Gala. Meanwhile, silence from Catherine. Harrison had his assistants check on her, just out of paranoid curiosity. "She's living in a small apartment in Seattle," his assistant reported. "She volunteers at a library. She takes the bus." Harrison laughed until his ribs hurt. "The bus! Oh, that is rich! She had it all and she threw it away." He felt safe. If she was taking the bus in Seattle, she wasn't the one destroying his company. It had to be Elon, or Bezos, one of the big boys trying to squeeze him out. He focused on the Gala. It had to be perfect. He rented out the entire Hangar 7 at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, a massive industrial chic venue. He invited the governor, the top Wall Street analysts, Hollywood celebrities. He hired the best caterers, the best security. "This night is my coronation," Harrison told Bella as she tried on a $50,000 dress. "By midnight, the stock goes public, and I will be untouchable." He didn't notice that while he was planning the party, a company called Apex Holdings had quietly purchased 49% of the voting shares of Sterling Dynamics on the secondary market, buying out all the disgruntled board members Harrison had insulted over the years. He was too busy choosing the champagne. The night of the Sterling Dynamics IPO Gala was a torrential downpour. Rain lashed against the massive glass windows of Hangar 7. But inside, the atmosphere was electric. Chandeliers the size of cars hung from the industrial rafters. A string orchestra played pop covers in the corner. Waiters in white tuxedos circulated with trays of caviar and gold-flaked truffles. Harrison stood at the center of the room, holding court. He looked exhausted. The stress of the last 6 months, the mysterious competitor, the bleeding money, had given him grey hairs and a permanent twitch in his left eye. But tonight, he covered it with adrenaline and expensive scotch. "Harrison, darling," Bella squealed, hanging off his arm. She was already drunk. "When do we get to see the new jet? You promised you'd reveal the new corporate jet tonight." "Soon, babe," Harrison muttered, scanning the room. The investors looked nervous. The stock price was wobbling in the after-hours trading. The rumors about Vantage Systems were spooking the market. Harrison needed a show of strength. He climbed onto the stage, tapping the microphone. The room went silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison boomed, his charisma switching on like a light bulb. "Thank you for joining me on this historic night. Despite the headwinds we have faced, Sterling Dynamics stands on the precipice of a new era." He gestured to the massive hangar doors behind him. "Critics say we are losing our edge," Harrison laughed. "They say there are ghosts in the machine. But I tell you, we are the machine. And to prove our dominance, I am proud to unveil the future of corporate aviation, the symbol of our global reach." This was the climax. He had leased a brand new Bombardier Global 7500, painted with the Sterling logo. It was supposed to taxi up to the hangar doors right now, shocking the crowd with its majesty. "Open the doors!" Harrison shouted. The massive hydraulic doors of the hangar began to groan open, revealing the rain-slicked tarmac of the airport outside. The wind howled in, fluttering the evening gowns of the guests. Harrison smiled, waiting for his jet. But the jet that taxied into the light wasn't the Sterling Bombardier. It was a Gulfstream G654, the Rolls-Royce of the sky. and it was painted entirely matte black. No logo, no markings, just a sleek, terrifying shadow moving through the rain. The crowd murmured. "What is that?" someone whispered. "Is that Harrison's?" Harrison's smile faltered. "Who is that?" he hissed into his headset to the event coordinator. "Get that plane out of the way. Where is my jet?" "Sir," the coordinator's voice crackled, panic-stricken. "Air traffic control says that plane has priority 1 clearance. They grounded your jet to let this one land. They say it's the new majority shareholder." Harrison froze. "Majority shareholder? I'm the majority shareholder." The black Gulf Stream came to a halt right in front of the open hangar doors, its nose pointing directly at Harrison like a missile. The engines whined down, a high-pitched scream that died into silence. The stairs of the jet began to lower. A spotlight from the hangar hit the doorway of the plane. The crowd held its breath. This was better drama than anything Harrison had planned. Was it a hostile takeover? A government raid? A figure stepped out of the plane. She was wearing a gown of emerald green silk that clung to her body like liquid armor. It had a slit up the leg and a neckline that was daring, sharp, and utterly powerful. She wore 4-inch stiletto heels that clicked ominously on the metal stairs. She held a black umbrella, but she didn't open it. She let the rain hit her, but somehow she didn't look wet. She looked baptized. Harrison squinted against the glare. He knew that walk. He knew that silhouette. But it was impossible. The woman walked down the red carpet that had been laid out for the plane. She walked past the stunned security guards. She walked right into the hangar, shaking the water from her hair. She looked up, locking eyes with Harrison on the stage. It was Catherine. But it wasn't the Catherine he knew. This wasn't the woman in the trench coat who took the bus. This was a woman who looked like she owned the oxygen in the room. She walked to the base of the stage. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. "Hello, Harrison," she said. Her voice wasn't amplified by a microphone, but in the dead silence of the hangar, everyone heard it. "Kate!" Harrison choked out, the microphone picking up his tremble. What are you doing here? Whose plane is that?" Catherine smiled. It was the same smile she had given him in the lawyer's office, the predator's smile. "That's my plane, Harrison," she said, her voice smooth as velvet. "I bought it this morning. I thought it would be fitting for my arrival." "Your plane?" Harrison laughed nervously, looking at the crowd. My ex-wife is having a joke. She doesn't have any money." "I didn't take your money, Harrison," Catherine said, stepping up onto the stage. She took the microphone from his limp hand. She turned to the crowd of investors, the board members, the press. "He's right. I didn't take a penny in the divorce," Catherine addressed the room, "because I didn't need his money." You see, Harrison forgot something very important about the early days of Sterling Dynamics. He forgot who wrote the source code for Nexus. A gasp went through the room. Harrison's face went pale grey. "No," he whispered. You just helped. You typed what I told you." "I wrote every line," Catherine said, turning back to him. "And when I left, I wrote a new code. Better code. Cleaner code." She paused for effect. "I am the CEO of Vantage Systems," she declared. Chaos erupted in the room. Flashbulbs went off like strobe lights. Vantage Systems was the company that had been bleeding Sterling dry for 6 months. "And," Catherine continued, raising her voice over the din, "as of this afternoon, Vantage Systems has completed a leveraged buyout of Apex Holdings, which means, Harrison..." She stepped closer to him, invading his space, towering over him in her heels. "I own 51% of this company. This isn't your gala, it's my retirement party. For you." The silence in Hangar 7 was absolute, a vacuum where the air used to be. The only sound was the drumming of rain against the metal roof, a relentless rhythm that seemed to be counting down the seconds of Harrison Sterling's career. Harrison stood on the stage, the microphone dangling loosely in his hand. He looked like a man who had been shot, but hadn't realized it yet. He blinked, trying to process the data Catherine had just fed him. 51%. Leveraged buyout, Vantage Systems. The words were English, but they didn't make sense together. "Security!" Harrison suddenly screamed, his voice cracking. The panic finally broke through the shock. "Get her off the stage! She's trespassing! She's deranged!" 3 large men in black suits, the head of Harrison's personal security detail, moved toward the stage. Harrison pointed a shaking finger at Catherine. "Remove her. Throw her out into the rain." The lead guard, a man named Miller, who Harrison had employed for 6 years, stepped onto the platform. He walked past Catherine. He didn't even look at her. He walked straight up to Harrison. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling," Miller said, his voice low and professional. "We've been instructed to secure the asset." "I am the asset, you moron," Harrison spat. "No, sir," Miller said, reaching for the microphone in Harrison's hand. "The asset is the CEO, and Mrs. Vale is the CEO." The crowd gasped. It was a ripple of sound that started at the front row, where the bankers sat, and rolled to the back. Catherine took a step forward, gently taking the microphone from Miller, who handed it to her with a nod of respect. She looked out at the sea of faces, faces that had ignored her for years, faces that had looked through her at dinner parties as if she were a piece of furniture, while they hung on Harrison's every word. "Please, everyone, stay calm," Catherine said. Her voice was steady, warm, and terrifyingly in control. "I apologize for the theatrical entrance, but given that Harrison was about to launch a fraudulent IPO based on inflated projections and stolen code, I felt a dramatic intervention was necessary to save your investments." "Liar!" Harrison roared, lunging toward her. Miller blocked him with a forearm like a steel bar. Harrison bounced off, stumbling back into the drum kit of the terrified band. "Fraudulent?" shouted a voice from the front row. It was Simon Kress, the senior analyst from Goldman Sachs. He looked pale. "Mrs. Sterling, Mrs. Vale, what are you talking about?" Catherine smiled at him. "Mr. Kress, good to see you again. You enjoyed my lemon tart at the Christmas party 2 years ago, I recall." Simon blinked, caught off guard. "Aye. Yes. Harrison told you that Nexus was a proprietary algorithm written solely by him," Catherine explained, pacing the stage like a panther. "He told you it uses a quantum-based prediction model. That is a lie. Nexus is based on a heuristic engine I developed in 2008 for a graduate thesis at MIT. A thesis Harrison claimed I never finished. I did. And I copyrighted the kernel code under my maiden name before we were married." She gestured to the massive screen behind her, which was supposed to be displaying the Sterling Dynamics stock ticker. "Change the feed, please," she said into the mic. The screen flickered. The Sterling logo vanished. In its place appeared a side-by-side comparison of code. On the left, Sterling Nexus. On the right, Vantage Prime. They were identical, down to the syntax errors. "As you can see," Catherine continued, "Sterling Dynamics doesn't own its core product. I do. And since Harrison didn't think to ask for the IP rights in the divorce because he assumed I was just a housewife who dabbled on his computer, I took them with me." The room erupted. This wasn't just drama. This was a financial nuclear bomb. Phones were out. People were shouting "sell" into their headsets. The stock price, which had been hovering in the after-hours market, began to freefall. Harrison pulled himself up from the drum kit, his face purple. "You can't do this! The prenup! You waived everything!" "I waived my right to your assets, Harrison," Catherine said, turning to look him dead in the eye. I didn't waive my right to mine. And since Sterling Dynamics is built on stolen property, I'm not just taking over. I'm suing you for 10 years of patent infringement. Unless—" She let the word hang there. "Unless what?" Harrison wheezed. "Unless the board votes, right now, to remove you as CEO and appoint me as interim chairman," Catherine said. "If you step down, I merge Vantage with Sterling. The stock stabilizes. The investors keep their money. The company survives." She looked at the front row where the board of directors sat. They were huddled together, whispering furiously. LaDonna Caldwell, Harrison's lawyer, looked like he was about to vomit. He looked at Harrison, then at the plummeting stock price on the phones of the people around him. LaDonna stood up. "Harrison," LaDonna said, his voice shaking. "Don't you dare, LaDonna," Harrison warned. "I move for an emergency vote of no confidence," LaDonna said loudly. "Seconded," yelled Simon Kress. "All in favor of removing Harrison Sterling effective immediately?" LaDonna asked the room. Every hand in the front row went up. Harrison stood alone on the stage, the rain still pouring outside, the black jet looming behind him like a hearse. He looked at Bella, seeking some kind of support. Bella was furiously typing on her phone. She looked up, saw him looking, and grimaced. "Harrison, the card really isn't working. I can't get an Uber. This is embarrassing." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Harrison looked back at Catherine. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't smiling anymore. She just looked tired and powerful. "Get him out of here," Catherine said softly to Miller. "You're making a mistake, Kate." Harrison screamed as security grabbed his arms. "You need me. You don't know how to run a company. You're a baker. You're a nobody." "I'm the nobody who just bought you out," she replied. As they dragged him off the stage and out the side door into the rain, Catherine turned back to the microphone. The room went silent again, waiting for the new queen to speak. "Now," she said, smoothing her emerald dress, "who would like some champagne? I believe we have a merger to celebrate." 3 hours later, the hangar was empty. The guests had left, buzzed on adrenaline and expensive liquor, their phones full of the story of the decade. The black Gulf Stream still sat on the tarmac, glistening under the floodlights. Catherine sat in what used to be Harrison's private office at the top of the Sterling headquarters. She hadn't gone to the after-party. She had come straight here. The office was a shrine to Harrison's ego. Portraits of himself, awards he had bought, a humidor full of Cubans he didn't smoke. She was sitting behind his desk, her desk now, staring at the rain hitting the floor-to-ceiling windows. The door opened. It wasn't security. It was a man in his 60s, wearing a rumpled tweed jacket and cleaning his glasses with a handkerchief. He looked more like a university professor than a corporate shark. "That went well, I think," the man said, chuckling. "It went exactly as modeled, David," Catherine said, finally relaxing. Her shoulders dropped. She kicked off the 4-inch heels and sighed. "Did you see his face?" "I did," said David Ross. "I've been waiting 12 years to see that face." David Ross was the silent partner. Years ago, he had been Harrison's mentor. Harrison had stolen his client list, ruined his reputation, and driven him into early retirement. Harrison had forgotten about David. Catherine hadn't. David poured 2 glasses of water from a pitcher and sat opposite her. "The board is terrified of you, by the way. They think you're a witch." "Let them," Catherine said. "Fear is useful right now." "So," David said, leaning back. "The question everyone is asking. The question Harrison is probably screaming at his reflection in a motel mirror right now. How did a woman with $0 in her bank account pull off $1 billion coup in 6 months. Catherine smiled, picking up a framed photo of Harrison from the desk and placing it face down. "He thinks money is power," Catherine said. "That was his mistake. Money is just fuel. Power is leverage." The flashback. Day 1. 6 months ago. The narrative rewound in her mind. The moment she had left the lawyer's office after signing the divorce papers, Catherine hadn't gone to a bus stop. She had gone to a public library. She sat in the back corner, opened a secure browser, and logged into a cloud server she hadn't touched in years. Harrison thought she spent her days gardening. He didn't know that for the last 5 years, every time he screamed at her, every time he belittled her intelligence, she had been coding. She had been building Vantage. It was a shadow program designed to track the inefficiencies in Harrison's own software. She had the product. She had the IP rights from her maiden name. But she had no capital. She knew she couldn't get a loan. She had no credit history as Catherine Vale. So, she went to the one group of people who hated Harrison Sterling as much as she did. The meeting. Month 1. The scene shifted to a smoky private club in London. Catherine, wearing a simple dress she bought at a thrift store, sat across from Olivia Grant. Olivia was the head of Blackwood Capital. 10 years ago, Harrison had humiliated Olivia in a deal, costing her firm millions. "You have 5 minutes, Mrs. Sterling," Olivia had said, checking her watch. "I don't usually take meetings with ex-wives." "It's Ms. Vale," Catherine corrected. "And I don't want your charity. I want your vengeance." Olivia paused. She looked up. "I'm listening." Catherine slid a flash drive across the table. "This contains the source code for a logistical AI that is 40% faster than Sterling Dynamics Nexus. It also contains proof that Nexus is built on a kernel I own. If I sue him, I tie him up in court for years. But if we beat him—" "Go on," Olivia said, her eyes narrowing. "Harrison is over-leveraged," Catherine explained. "He's selling assets to fund the IPO. If we create a competitor, a ghost company, and undercut his 3 biggest contracts, his cash flow will collapse. He will be forced to sell personal stock to keep the price up. When he sells, the price drops. When the price drops, the board gets nervous." "And then?" "And then," Catherine said, "we buy the debt. We don't buy the stock. We buy the debt of the board members who are leveraged against the company. We own the people who own the votes." Olivia smiled. It was a shark's smile. "How much do you need?" "I don't want money," Catherine said. "I want equity. You put up the capital for the shell company. I provide the tech and the strategy. We split the profits 50-50. But I get the voting rights." Olivia laughed. "You're dangerous, aren't you?" "I learned from the worst," Catherine replied. Back to the present. "Olivia called," David said, bringing Catherine back to the room. "She's ecstatic. She wants to know what you plan to do with Harrison." Catherine looked out the window. The rain was stopping. The city lights were flickering back into view. "Harrison is a symptom, David," she said. "The company is the disease. We're going to gut it. We're going to strip the vanity projects, sell the jets, fire the yes men. We're going to build something that actually works." "He's calling you, you know," David said, nodding at the desk phone. The light was blinking furiously. Catherine looked at the phone. "Let it ring," she said. "He has nothing left, Catherine," David said quietly. "You took the house, the company, the reputation. You even took his pride. Is it enough?" Catherine stood up and walked to the window. She saw her reflection in the glass. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She didn't look like a wife. "He told me I was lucky to have him," she whispered. "He told me I would be nothing without him. He defined my existence by his success. She turned back to David. It's not about revenge, David. If I just wanted revenge, I would have burned the company down. This is about correction. I built this. He stole it. I just took it back. What about the jet? David asked, grinning. A bit flashy for you, wasn't it? Catherine laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time. Oh, the Gulf Stream. I didn't buy it. You said on stage you bought it. I rented it for the night, she confessed, her eyes twinkling. Cost me a fortune, but the optics were necessary. We're actually quite cash poor at the moment until the merger settles. I'll probably be taking a cab home. David roared with laughter. You are terrifying. I'm a businesswoman, Catherine said. She grabbed her coat. Come on, David, let's go get a burger. I'm starving. Being a villain is hungry work. As they walked out of the office, Catherine paused to look at the nameplate on the door. Harrison Sterling, CEO. She reached into her purse, pulled out a marker, and drew a thick black line through the name. Above it, she wrote, C. Vale. She didn't slam the door. She closed it gently. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the silence of a clean slate. The fall of Harrison Sterling was not a sudden crash. It was a long, humiliating slide. The week following the gala, Harrison camped out in the penthouse of the Four Seasons, racking up a bill he could no longer afford. He spent his days screaming at LaDonna Caldwell over the phone, demanding legal retribution. "Sue her for fraud!" Harrison shouted, pacing the carpet in his silk robe. "She stole my code. That heuristic engine was developed on my computers, in my house, while she was married to me." "Harrison, please listen." LaDonna's voice was weary. "We've been over this. You signed the waiver. You explicitly waived all rights to any intellectual property she created or held. You signed it to protect your assets from her. The irony is, legally binding. Then attack the hostile takeover," Harrison insisted. "The board didn't have a quorum. They were under duress." "The SEC has already reviewed the filing," LaDonna said. "It's clean, Harrison. Catherine, Miss Vale, followed every regulation. She bought the debt. She flipped the board. She owns the majority. It's over." There was a pause. Then LaDonna cleared his throat. "Also, Harrison, I'm going to have to resign as your counsel." Harrison froze. "What? You can't quit. I made you." "The firm represents Sterling Dynamics," LaDonna said coldly. "Ms. Vale is now the chairman of Sterling Dynamics. It would be a conflict of interest to represent you against our own client. Good luck, Harrison." The line went dead. Harrison threw the phone against the wall. It shattered. The next blow came from Bella. She didn't even break up with him in person. He woke up to find the closet empty and a note on the pillow. It read, "Sorry, Harry, I can't do poor. It's bad for my brand." XOXO. He checked his accounts. He had liquidated almost everything to prop up the stock price before the gala. The money from the sale of the Tuscan villa was gone. The money from the stock sale was gone. He had the penthouse bill, a leased Ferrari he couldn't pay for, and a reputation that was now toxic. He was unhireable. In the tight-knit world of high finance, nobody wanted to touch the man who had been outsmarted by his housewife. He was a punchline, the trillion-dollar man who walked away with nothing. Desperation set in. Harrison moved out of the hotel and into a small, furnished apartment in Queens. The smell of stale cigarette smoke and boiled cabbage permeated the hallway. It was a far cry from Hudson Yards. He tried to launch a comeback. He spent months drafting a business plan for a new tech incubator. He called every contact in his Rolodex. "Hey Jim, it's Harrison. Long time. Listen, I've got a killer opportunity." Click. "Bill, how's the wife? Listen, about that golf trip. Harrison, please don't call this number again." He was radioactive. 6 months after the gala, Harrison sat in a diner, staring at a cup of lukewarm coffee. He wore a suit that was starting to fray at the cuffs. He hadn't been able to afford the dry cleaner. He opened the Wall Street Journal left on the table by a previous patron. The headline stared back at him. Veil of Success. How Catherine Vale turned Sterling Dynamics into a green tech giant. The article detailed how she had pivoted the company, stripped away the bloated management, and launched the Nexus system to optimize global food distribution, reducing waste by 30%. The stock price had tripled. Harrison crumpled the paper. He felt a burning sensation in his chest that wasn't heartburn. It was the realization that she hadn't just beaten him. She was better at his job than he ever was. He had spent 15 years thinking he was the sun, and she was just a moon reflecting his light. He realized now, in the dim light of a queen's diner, that he had been the satellite all along. 2 years had passed since the gala. To the outside world, Catherine Vale was a deity. The headlines called her the Iron Queen of Tech. Time magazine had put her on the cover, not smiling, but looking out a window, deep in thought, with the caption, "The Silent Revolution." But the reality inside the glass tower of Vantage Sterling was far from a fairy tale. Catherine sat in her office at 3:15 a.m., the hum of the HVAC system the only sound in the building. Her eyes burned. On the desk in front of her lay a termination list. The merger between Vantage and Sterling Dynamics hadn't been seamless. Mergers never are. To save the company, she had to cut 1,500 jobs in the manufacturing sector. She wasn't baking cookies anymore. She was destroying livelihoods to save a bottom line. She rubbed her temples, feeling the migraine that had become her constant companion. This was the part of the revenge story nobody warned her about. The victory is brief, but the governance is eternal. She had the crown, but it was heavy, and it was cold. "You should go home, Catherine," David Ross said, appearing in the doorway. He was the only one who didn't knock. "I can't," she sighed, signing another document. "The Asian markets are opening in 20 minutes, and the board is breathing down my neck about the Q3 dip in regional sales. Our tech is perfect, David. Nexus is flawless. But we're losing the human element. Clients say we feel robotic." David poured himself a coffee. "We're engineers, Kate. We don't do warm and fuzzy. We need a front man, someone who can sell ice to an Eskimo, even if the ice is melting." Catherine swiveled her chair around to face the city lights. "I fired all the liars, David, and now I find myself needing a liar." 30 miles away, in a cramped basement apartment in Queens that smelled of mildew and boiled onions, Harrison Sterling was ironing a shirt. It was his only good shirt. The collar was fraying slightly at the edge, but if he kept his jacket on, nobody would notice. Harrison had ceased to be a person of interest in New York. He was now a ghost. The first year after the fall had been a fury of lawsuits and denial. He had burned through his remaining cash, trying to sue Catherine, trying to sue the board, trying to sue the universe. He lost every time. The second year had been the silence. The friends stopped answering. The club memberships were revoked. Bella was long gone, now married to a hedge fund manager in Miami. Harrison had learned the hard way that his charisma, which he prized so highly, was entirely dependent on his credit limit. Without the money, his jokes weren't funny, his arrogance wasn't charming, and his presence wasn't required. He was currently driving for a ride-share app under a leased Toyota, but today he had a chance. A real chance. He had spent 3 months building a pitch deck for a consultancy firm. He used a pseudonym on the application, Harry Stone. He didn't dare use his real name. The name Sterling was poison. If he could just get in the room, he told himself, He could dazzle them. He could sell. It was the only thing he had ever been truly good at. He checked his reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. He looked older. The tan was gone, replaced by a pallor of stress. The veneers still shone, but they looked too big for his gaunt face now. "Showtime, Harry," he whispered. It was a desperate prayer. The appointment was at 10 a.m. at a venture capital firm called Apex Ventures. Harrison didn't know that Apex was a subsidiary of Vantage Sterling. Catherine had kept the branding separate to acquire smaller startups without spooking them. Harrison sat in the waiting room, clutching his battered leather briefcase. His palms were sweating. "Mr. Stone?" the receptionist called out. "The CEO will see you now." Harrison stood up, smoothing his jacket. The CEO. He had expected a mid-level manager. This was better. He could work as CEO. CEOs loved confidence. He walked through the double doors, putting on the mask. He flashed his teeth. He broadened his shoulders. "Good morning," Harrison boomed, striding into the office. "I want to thank you for taking the time." The words died in his throat. The chair behind the desk swiveled around. Catherine Vale sat there. She wasn't wearing the soft cardigans of their marriage, nor the emerald gown of the Gala. She wore a sharp, charcoal grey suit. Her hair was cut into a severe, chic bob. She looked like a weapon. Harrison stopped in the middle of the room. The air left his lungs. He felt a physical wave of nausea. "Hello, Harrison," she said. Her voice was dry, devoid of any emotion. Harrison stood frozen. His brain scrambled for an exit strategy. Run? Faint? Laugh? I didn't know, he stammered. "The sign outside says Apex." "I own Apex," Catherine said. She gestured to the chair opposite her. "Sit down." "I'd rather leave," Harrison whispered, turning to the door. The humiliation was total. He couldn't bear her seeing him like this, frayed collar, cheap shoes, desperate eyes. "I said sit down," Catherine commanded. It wasn't a request. It was the voice of someone who commanded 10,000 employees. Harrison hesitated, then slowly walked to the chair and sat. He couldn't look her in the eye. He stared at the expensive, minimalist sculpture on her desk. "You applied under the name Harry Stone," Catherine said, glancing at a tablet. "You claim to have 15 years of executive sales experience in the logistics sector, but there is no record of a Harry Stone in the industry." "It's a pseudonym," Harrison muttered. "I know. I recognize the formatting of the resume," Catherine said. "You always did overuse bold text." She set the tablet down. The silence stretched for an agonizing minute. "You look tired, Harrison," she said softly. That broke him. The anger he expected would have been easier to handle. The pity was unbearable. "I'm driving an Uber, Kate," he blurted out, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Is that what you want to hear? I live in a basement. I eat ramen. I'm 50 years old and I have nothing. You won. You took the company. You took the money. You took the dignity. Are you happy?" "I didn't take your dignity, Harrison," Catherine replied coolly. "You gave that away when you tried to pitch a consultancy firm using a fake name because you were too proud to admit who you were." Harrison gripped the arms of the chair. "I have a good idea. My pitch? It's solid." "I've read your pitch," Catherine said. "It's mediocre. It's 2015 thinking in a 2025 market. It relies on relationship building in an era of algorithmic automation." Harrison slumped. "Right. Well, I'll show myself out. However," Catherine continued, leaning forward, "my algorithms are failing." Harrison paused, half risen from his chair. "What?" "We are bleeding clients in the Northeast," Catherine admitted. "We have the best data, the fastest routes, the cheapest prices. But we are losing contracts to a company called Redline. Do you know why? Red Line? Harrison scoffed. Their software is garbage. It's basically an Excel spreadsheet. Exactly, Catherine said. But their CEO takes the clients out for steak dinners. He remembers their kids' birthdays. He makes them laugh. My engineers, they don't know how to laugh. They send emails with spreadsheets attached. Catherine stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the ant-sized cars on the street below. I built a perfect machine, Harrison. But I forgot that people don't buy from machines. They buy from people. She turned back to him. I have a position open. Regional Sales Director for the Northeast. It's a grinder job. You'd be on the road 4 days a week. You'd be dealing with angry warehouse managers in Jersey and arrogant tech bros in Boston. It's not a C-suite role. There's no private jet. There's no Gala. Harrison stared at her. His heart began to hammer against his ribs. You're offering me a job? He asked, incredulous. After I cheated on you? After I tried to leave you with nothing? I'm not offering it to you because I forgive you, Catherine said sharply. I'm offering it to you because you are a narcissist, Harrison. You need people to like you. It's your oxygen. And right now, I have a company full of introverts who don't care if they are liked, they only care if they are right. She slid a contract across the desk. Base salary is $80,000. Commission is capped at 5%. You report to Marcus, my assistant, who is 27 years old and will absolutely enjoy micromanaging you. Harrison looked at the number. $80,000. He used to spend that on wine in a month. But right now, it looked like a fortune. It looked like rent. It looked like a life. Why? He asked again, his voice cracking. You could hire anyone. I could, Catherine agreed. But a broken dog bites harder. I know you, Harrison. I know that if I give you this chance, you will work harder than anyone else. Not for the money, but to prove to me and to yourself that you still matter. She uncapped a pen and placed it on the contract. This is the only offer you will get. If you walk out that door, you go back to the basement. If you sign, you go to work. Right now, Harrison looked at the pen. He looked at Catherine. For the first time in 15 years, he saw her. Not as a prop, not as an accessory, but as a giant. He realized then that he had never really been the trillion-dollar man. He had just been the man standing next to the woman who was worth $1 trillion. He picked up the pen. His hand shook, just a little. I'll report to Marcus, Harrison said quietly. He signed his name, Harrison Sterling. Catherine didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She pressed a button on her intercom. Marcus, please come escort Mr. Sterling to his cubicle and get him a new employee badge. As Harrison walked to the door, he stopped. He turned back to her. Kate? She didn't look up from her paperwork. It's Miss Vale, Harrison, and you're burning daylight. Go sell something. He nodded, swallowed hard, and walked out. When the door clicked shut, Catherine finally let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 2 years. She looked at the empty chair. A single tear tracked down her cheek, but she wiped it away instantly. She picked up the phone. David? It's done. He's on the payroll. Yes, I know it's a risk. No, he won't try to take over again. Because David, he finally knows who the boss is. She hung up, turned her chair back to the window, and watched the sun break through the clouds over New York City. She had her empire, she had her peace, and now she even had her salesman. The divorce was finally settled. Harrison Sterling signed that contract, and, according to rumors in the industry, he went on to become the top salesman in the Northeast region for 3 years running. He never tried to start another company. He never bought another jet. He just worked. Catherine Vale didn't just defeat her enemy. She repurposed him. She proved that the ultimate power move isn't destroying someone's life. It's having the confidence to let them live it, knowing they can never touch you again. This story reminds us that revenge is a dish best served productively. Catherine didn't need Harrison's apology. She needed his sales figures. And in the end, she got both. Now I want to hear from you. Was Catherine too soft, or was this the ultimate power move? Would you have hired your toxic ex to work in a cubicle? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story kept you hooked, please smash that like button. It helps the algorithm find more people who love a good drama. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Next week, we're covering the story of a janitor who accidentally threw away a hard drive worth 200 million in Bitcoin, and the insane lengths he went to get it back. I'll see you then. Stay safe and stay smart.